Time to freak out. That just reminds me of Freak the Freak Out from Victorious. Freak the Freak Out. People know what I'm saying. You know what I'm thinking. Hello friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Aaliyah, and it is that time of year again to do the mid-year freakout tag. If you're not familiar, this is something that goes around every year all across BookTube as a way for us to kind of sit and reflect on our reading so far this year, think about everything we want to accomplish for the rest of the year, and freak out a little bit about the fact that we're already 6 months in. This is just a whole lot of fun. I did it last year and I really enjoyed myself, and so we're doing it again. I will be leaving the original tag video down in the description if you wanted to check it out, but without any further ado, let's just hop into the questions and get started. So this tag starts out really strong and aggressive. So the first question is, what is the best book you've read so far this year? And to be honest, I don't have a favorite book yet this year. So, okay, don't get me wrong. I've given a fair amount of books 5 stars so far this year. Like, I've really enjoyed a lot of the books that I've read so far this year. However, none have really become like a new favorite book of all time, you know? Like, when I first read this question, nothing just came to mind right away. It was one of those where I had to like go back and look through all the books I've read this year and pick out the ones that I gave 5 stars. So I did like a lot of books, but nothing's like really standing out quite yet. That being said, for the sake of this tag, I wanted to just give some kudos to a couple of the books that I did give 5 stars because I did really, really enjoy them. Obviously, I gave them 5 stars. They're just not like all-time favorites that I'm going to obsess about. So anyway, the first of those would be Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. I read this in March? I think I read this in March. And I adored this. I thought it was so good. This is about a girl about roughly my age, trying to figure out her life and somehow getting married to a really hot girl from New York while she's in Vegas. And I connected maybe a little bit too much to this book, lived a little bit vicariously through her. So this just meant a whole lot to me, and I ended up giving this 5 stars, obviously, that's what we're talking about. So that would be one of them. The other ones I at least wanted to mention would be the Six of Crows duology, which I adored. I just had too much fun with those books. And then The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I really liked that book as well. So no like super all-time obsessive favorites quite yet, but those are a few that I did really, really love. The second question is, what is the best sequel you've read so far this year? And usually I don't actually read a whole lot of series. I'm more of a standalone kind of girl, but I've actually read a lot more this year than I normally do. So that means I have a lot more books to talk about. I promise I'm going to try to keep my answers to like 1 or 2 books for most of these questions, but I just happen to have a lot for this one. So there you go. The first one I have to mention is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the 3rd and final book in the Brown Sisters trilogy, and it was such a good conclusion to this series. We've got Eve and Jacob's relationship, which was just so much fun and so sweet, so cute, and just the best finale for this trilogy. I had so much fun with this. Speaking of fun, I have to mention Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This is the 2nd and final book in the Six of Crows duology, and I adored this book. It was just impeccable, amazing, incredible. So I can't not mention that. I also wanted to mention A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is the 2nd book in the Wayfarer series, the sequel to A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and I really loved this continuation of the series and following some new characters. It was just a whole lot of fun, and it made me really excited for the next book. And then finally, the 2nd book in the Others series, which was Murder of Crows by Anne Bishop. I had so much fun with this. This is like my guilty pleasure, except not very guilty, but just my fun urban paranormal fantasy series that I'm having the most fun with. And this was just such a great sequel to keep up the hype for me anyway. So yeah, I've had so much good luck with sequels. with series this year, and it really bodes well for me. This was unprecedented, but I'm not complaining. Question 3 is, what is a new release that you haven't read yet but you want to? And I have 2 answers for this, and the first one has me hanging my head in shame. I'm very upset, and that is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. Listen, I had every intention of reading this in June. All I wanted to do was read this in June. And a lot of personal stuff happened in June, and I ended up reading pretty much nothing physically all month. And so I didn't. And I'm very upset. So this is like top of my priority list. I need to be reading this ASAP. As soon as I can get myself to like start reading physically, I'm reading this. I'm super mad that I haven't read this yet. And the other new release that I haven't read yet is Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas. This is his sophomore novel and a Peter Pan retelling, which is fun. I'm actually saving this for later this year because it fits one of my Buzzword Reading Challenge prompts for, is it November? Maybe it's not that late. Later this year, though. So it is a new release, and I do plan on reading it, but I have plans for it. So this one isn't nearly as upsetting as One Last Stop. But yeah, so those are my 2 new releases that will be getting read soon-ish. Speaking of new releases, the 4th question is, what is your most anticipated new release for the second half of the year? And I have a couple for this one. The first one I wanted to mention is Redemptor by Jordan E. Flecko. This is the sequel to Raybearer, which was a fantasy that I absolutely adored last year. It was like definitely my favorite fantasy of last year, and also just one of my top books of last year. And so this is very, very exciting, a West African inspired fantasy, and I'm dying for the sequel. And this comes out on August 17th. Next up we have Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. This is I'm so excited about this. TJ Klune is one of my favorite authors, and I know that this has something to do with underworld shenanigans. I don't know. We're not going full synopsis here, but I just know it has to do with a dude who dies and he's not quite ready to move on yet. So that's very exciting. It's coming out September 21st. After that, we have The Light of Uncommon Stars. Did I get that right? Light from Uncommon Stars by Raika Aoki. And I'm not entirely sure if I got that name right either. But I'm very excited about this book because it has been pitched as Good Omens meets The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, 2 books that I have very, very, very much enjoyed. And so I cannot wait for this to be coming out. And that comes out on September 28th. And last but not least is Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World, which is the much anticipated sequel to Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire-Sanz. And it's happening. This is happening. I'm so excited. Aristotle and Dante has such a close place in my heart. I adore this book. We've been waiting for the sequel for years, and it's happening. It is coming out October 12th, and I could not be more excited about it. So there are a lot more new releases coming out, but those are definitely my top 4 for the second half of 2021. Now, to get a little controversial, we have our biggest disappointment of the year so far. And unlike my favorite book of the year so far, this one had no competition and I didn't have to think twice about it. And that is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This took me over a month to read. This was something that I was hoping I would like. This was a little bit outside of my comfort zone, granted, but I didn't think I would be angry reading it, you know? And yet, here we are. I haven't fully wrapped this up yet, so you'll see it in a different video where I can talk about it at length, but this just made me very angry. I didn't like much of anything about this book, which is really unfortunate because it's a really popular book in general, but especially on BookTube. Like, so many people love this book, and so I was hoping I would be one of them as well, and I was not. So I just hated how it treated its female main character, just its female characters, period. All the other characters sucked. It was boring as hell, and it put me in a giant reading slump. So this was a huge bummer, especially because I bought this book for my friend for us to buddy read it together, and then neither of us liked it very much. So overall, ginormous disappointment, and I'm really mad about it. And I'm really looking forward to unhauling this as soon as possible. Back to the positives. The next question is, what is the biggest surprise of the year so far? And for me, this would have to be Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. I know I mention this at least every other video, but I'm not really a memoir person. I don't tend to jive with them for whatever reason. I don't know, it's hard for me to connect with them, but this one was just so different, and definitely the only memoir I've like actively been enjoying the reading experience of. I think part of it is just because the structure is a lot different from any other memoir I've ever read, and overall it was just a really fun reading experience, and just generally a huge surprise. I didn't think I was going to actively like a memoir, much less give one 5 stars. Like this was out of left field, but I'm really happy about it, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping to read more of Caitlin Doughty's books, that is for sure. Question number 7 is your favorite new author. And to be honest, I don't really have one of these either. I don't really consider somebody a favorite author unless I've read at least 2 to 3 books of theirs and given all of them 4 or 5 stars. And I haven't really gotten there with any of the authors that I've read so far this year, except maybe Talia Hibbert. But since all of the books I've read by her are in the same series, that kind of doesn't seem quite right either. So I guess I'll just talk about some authors that I'm really interested in reading more of. So I guess Talia Hibbert would be one of them. I've only read her Brown Sisters trilogy, but I'm really interested in reading some more of her romance. And then Matt Haig, who was the author of The Midnight Library. A couple of his other books have been on my TBR anyway, and so me liking The Midnight Library so much made me extra invested, I guess, in reading more of his catalog. So those are 2 authors that I'm really looking forward to reading more of, and hopefully will become some favorite authors, maybe. Question number 8 is newest fictional crush, and I don't do that. So we're gonna move on to the next one. Question 9 is new favorite character, and this is hands down Wylan Van Eck from the Six of Crows duology. I love this boy. So I know I like ranted about how much I love him in my March wrap up when I read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, but I love this kid. He is my son. I love his character. I love everything about him, really. Definitely just like a new favorite character of all time. I love this child. Some honorable mentions would have to be Grace Porter from Honey Girl. She's the main character, and again, I related to her way too hard, but I also love her a lot. And then also Sidra from A Close and Common Orbit. I'm not going to say much about her because spoilers, but I really loved her perspective in that book. I thought it was super interesting. So yes, that is that. Wylan supremacy. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry, which isn't really something that I do. I don't really get that like physically emotional when I'm reading. The closest I think would be when I was reading Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga. This is a book in verse about a girl from Syria who ends up becoming a refugee with her mother in the States. And I didn't like full on cry at this book, but I definitely had like a little tickle in the tear ducts during a very specific scene that just like tugged at my heartstrings. I had a slight, like not even quite tearing up, but like, oh, I felt it, you know? So that's probably the closest that I've gotten. Would recommend this book 100%. Especially if you're looking for a book in verse, if you like want to try out reading poetry that's more narrative, I guess, would recommend. But yeah, this would be the closest I got. Question number 11 is the flip side, a book that made you happy. And so the first one I have to mention is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. And I mean, it was so cute. It was so heckin' cute. I was giddy reading this. I was smiling like a fool. You can't not be happy reading this, because even when things are getting a little messy, it's so sweet. It's so cute. It's everything you could possibly want from a rom-com. It's great. I loved reading every page of this. Other than that, the other book I wanted to mention for this has to be Ace by Angela Chen. This made me happy for a very different reason. And it was incredible reading this, because it was just so nice to see myself and my sexuality be represented so well, so clearly. It's written so well. It's done such a service in making more people aware of the nuances of asexuality, and it just made me so happy reading this, to feel so well represented and so understood, and excited to know that this is out in the world and people are going to be reading it and starting to understand me and other people like me more. And so I loved it, and I will push this on everybody I possibly can. So if you have any interest, read this. But yeah, so this made me incredibly happy, and I'm really, really happy that this exists. Question number 12 is, what is the most beautiful book you have bought or received this year? And I didn't read this year, but I bought it this year, and that would be Ray Bearer by Jordan Fueco. Again, this was one of my favorites of last year, and I needed to own it, both because I loved it and also because look at it. This cover is just stunning. Redemptor, the sequel, also has just as beautiful of a cover, although I think I like this one slightly more, because just like, look at it. Like, it's shiny, it's gorgeous. I think the cover really speaks for itself. Last but not least, question number 13 is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And this list is infinite. So we're going to just say my top 5 of books that I really want to get to by the end of the year that I haven't already mentioned. So the first one I wanted to talk about is Sharks in the Time of Saviors. This is by Kawai Strong Washburn, and it's a kind of magical realism, fabulism about a family from Hawaii. I don't know, I really wanted to read it in May and I didn't get to it, so this is definitely something I want to get to soon. I also want to get to Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. This is like a sci-fi male romance something. I don't know, it's supposed to be really good. The Witcher King by Kay Ancrum. I read The Weight of the Stars by Kay Ancrum earlier this year, and I really want to get to this one. This was her debut, so really looking forward to this one. Full Disclosure by Cameron Garrett. This is a contemporary YA about a girl who is HIV positive. And lastly, Walk Away by Cory Doctorow. And this is an adult sci-fi that my dad has been badgering me to read for a while, and that I've heard is really good. So I will be reading this as well. Those are just my top 5. Again, I have plenty more that I definitely want to read by the end of the year, but hopefully I'll at least get to those. We'll see. Okay, that is it. That is my mid-year freakout tag, and I am low-key freaking out that it is already July. How? But, you know, I'm actually really excited for what is in store for the second half of the year. There's a lot of good new releases coming out and just a lot of books that I'm really excited to get to, so if the first year or the first half of the year was any indication, I think we have good things in store. So if you liked this video, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and go ahead and hop into the comments and let me know what you're really excited to read for the second half of the year. I would love to know and maybe get some new recommendations, because we're never going to say no to that. But yeah, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.